Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're going to be talking about Torghast. We're going to talk about my thoughts on Torghast when the game first launched, when Shadowlands first launched, and then we're going to get into the nerfs that they put out to make it a bit easier, and I'm going to have a suggestion of something they could do to maybe try to appease all parties involved. So, a little bit of backstory is I actually really enjoy Torghast. I enjoyed it on the beta. I think it's a really good idea, and I hope that they can develop it not only throughout this expansion, but maybe similar experiences going forward of solo content. Or you don't have to do Torghast solo, but soloable content. So, like the Mage Tower from Legion, for example, is soloable content that was used for mostly cosmetics, but it was kind of a cool thing to do. And I think that they could kind of unlock the same thing through Torghast. I think kind of putting the really important currency, the Soul Ash, tied to it might end up being a bit of a mistake going forward for this type of content. But and it's really what caused the current rift. But yeah, we can talk about that more when I'm getting to the change that I think that they should possibly think about making, if they, you know, really want to tie it to a important currency. So first of all, when Torghast first came out, I was having a ton of fun with it. I main rep Paladin, and it was actually pretty easy for me. Some of the bosses were challenging. I had to do line of sighting, kiting, use all my abilities, turn evil or something randomly on some things, and it was really fun. But I never really died until I got to a boss that I couldn't beat. So I really enjoyed it. Some people were saying it's too hard, it's too hard, it's too hard. That's the number one thing I seen among casual players, was that Torghast was too hard. It wasn't. They couldn't do it. They couldn't acquire their Soul Ash, right? And I'm like, well, it doesn't seem that hard. You just have to. And I'm like condescendingly telling them, well, you just got to do this, this, and this, and then you'll be able to do it. A lot of times I just joked around, oh, just be a rat paladin. But then we finally got to a boss that I couldn't kill. So I'm a try hard player. I'm like, whatever, maybe like a top 100 rep paladin, something along those lines usually for ranking. Not just in rating. That's not overall, not PvP, not anything. So I'm less than that, right? But I'm still, I try hard, and I try to min max and everything like that. I know all my buttons. I have, everything like that. I know my rotation, all the simple stuff. And I got to a boss I couldn't kill. It was a caster that was also kind of a melee. It was like a hybrid. I wish I could remember her. I think it was a girl NPC, but not that that matters. But it was like a duelist, but it was like a caster duelist, is what I want to say there. And so I was checking the logs, and the cast would hit me for 15k, and I could only interrupt every other of them. And then the melee was hitting me for like 10 to 12,000, and I just could not survive that very long, obviously. And I didn't have great anima powers, granted, but I actually had some fairly defensive ones that run, and I just couldn't beat it. And I'm like, okay, well, it's just bad luck. So then I did it again, tried the same thing again, and instead I got to an end of. It wasn't even like a. It was a similar. It was actually wasn't the same exact. It wasn't the end boss. It was a end of floor boss, and I couldn't beat that. It was like floor 5 or floor 4, end of floor boss, and I couldn't beat that either. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I thought that was just me. And it turns out the only reason I beat it before is because I did have enough good defensive anima powers. This run actually probably had worse anima powers. But you shouldn't have to have the best anima powers to win, obviously. You should be able to have. Yeah, I could see if you get the complete worst luck anima powers that maybe you can't win. But if you have even medium luck and anima powers, I feel like you probably should get through it overall. And that's where this issue comes in. There's going to be people who disagree with that and say that, no, you should fail sometimes. And I overall want to agree with that. That's kind of my attitude in life, but I have to be realistic with it as well. Because if you're going to devote 40 minutes to an hour to something, to a video game, and the thing you're doing is rewarding you something that gives you player power, then if you spend that amount of time doing it, you have to get some tangible reward. Example, if you do a Mythic Plus on time, you get a chance that there's extra loot in the chest. However, if you don't do it in time, if you take an hour to do it, there still is. It's not like you don't get any loot. It's not like you don't get credit for completing the dungeon. So So if you were going to make it, if you're going to keep it at the super hard levels, it needed nerfed at least somewhat. If I'm this player who has good gear, some amount of skill, have everything going for me, uh, and I can't do something, then I can only imagine that the most casual. I have friends who are casual players, and they are, you know, they'd probably want to quit the game after doing that. So I get it. It did need to be nerfed somewhat. Now, if you wanted to keep it harder, though, you would just have to reward amount of the soul ash, even if you failed. And like, so let's say you got to floor 5, maybe you would get 2/3 of the soul ash. You would have to obviously do like some kind of equation. You couldn't do like 5, 6 really, because then you would just do floor 1 on the next run and quit, and that's not the kind of thing that they want to encourage doing 5 floors and then 1, or doing 4 floors and then 2. They would probably want you to do at least half of it, I would imagine. At least get to the 4th floor. So after you get to the first broker, I'd imagine that would be their thinking on that. But I actually have an even better solution for this. And it's really simple, and it's what they've done even with islands to an extent. With islands and BFA. Now this was just giving us artifact power, which was still really important. Of course, it did give player power, but regular islands were super easy. You could basically solo them once you got a little bit of gear. Then you had PvP islands, which was just depending on who you're matched up against. It could be really easy, it could be really hard. And then you had mythic islands, which were still pretty easy, and especially since you had to pre-made group it. If you just have 3 geared players, then it was super easy still, and that just gave you slightly more of your bar to get your weekly done, right? So, and it did give you an increased chance for rewards as well. So that's how they structured that. And I kind of think that might be the solution for Torghast, maybe even in this expansion, in the end going forward in the content. So the reason why they're tying Soul Ash to it, and you might not like this, and that's the thing I always want to point out is you might not like Blizzard's thinking on something, but you can at least try to understand it. And I guarantee what they're thinking is we're going to tie this player power to it because we want this to be a meaningful thing that you do. We don't want half the player base skipping it. We put a lot of work into it. We put a lot of effort into it. We made the game after all. And this is something we want our players to do and experience, and we want to make it better. We don't want people to just skip over it. Which, by the time people got their necklaces up, people would just skip over islands. People didn't want to do islands. People didn't want to do islands on their alts a lot of times. So, for just as an example. But with Torghast, they want it to be a fun experience that you want to do and that you need to do to get you in there. And then they want to meld it around the player base as it goes on. And that's just, I guarantee that's what their thinking is on it. So that's why Soul Ash is probably tied to it. They were going to tie something important to it either way. So what you do is, if some people, there's going to be a fraction of the community, and it won't just be high-end players. There'll be casual players who want a hard activity to do. And there's a challenge halls, right? That's going to be coming out. That's just for cosmetic stuff, right? So we already have a version of this in a way. But I think what you should just what the obvious solution is when you queue for it. So when you walk up to the portal and the thing pops up, you either queue for normal, or my guess is they would call it mythic. Maybe they would call it heroic, but just 2 difficulty levels. One is more highly tuned to where you're going to need gear or a lot of skill or really, really, really lucky anima powers to complete. And one is more of its current form, where as long as you're putting in your 20, 30 minutes, you're going to get it done and you're going to get your Soul Ash. Both of these would have to award the same amount of Soul Ash. The player power thing is tricky, and you cannot be awarding the same amount. You can't be giving more Soul Ash to better players and less Soul Ash to, either less good or less engaged players, whatever. That's not how you build a strong community. You can't leave the other people behind. You can't let the rich get richer. In other words, it's not smart when you're building up, when you want a very large community in your game. You can't cater to only one group. So you can't have it give more Soul Ash, but what you can do is you could have it give gold, Stygia, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, the stuff in the maw, or anima. The Stygia is not very great in my opinion, so for me it would be gold or anima, or maybe both of those at the end. And the faster you do it, the more you get. That could be a reward for going faster. You get the same amount of Soul Ash, and you get a challenge, and you have the bonus if you go super fast. if you've completed, you're going to get X amount of gold, X amount of anima, whatever. If you go really fast, you'll get more on a scale. Kind of like it could be timed like a Mythic Plus or something like that. Like this is what the timer is for it. If you beat the time for every however much you beat the time, whatever their algorithm is, this is how much more you get. Similar to if you beat it by this much, you get +1 to your key, +2 to your key, +3 to your key. It would be if you beat the Torghast run and this time you get this much gold, this much anima, and um, you know it's not the greatest reward, but I think it would scratch that itch for the players that are wanting the more difficult content. And I think for the more casual player, like, and I'm not talking about skill level here either. Like player that doesn't want to put an hour into a failed Torghast run, you just do the regular mode, get your Soul Ash, be done with it for the week. Do your 2 runs, whatever. Eventually, it would probably be 3 runs, and then be done with it for the week. No worries. For other people like me who really enjoy Torghast, maybe I go, you know what? I did the challenge run. I'm bored of that, so I'm gonna go do I want some anima or whatever. I'm gonna go do a mythic Skulless Halls and see how fast of a run I can do. See if I can beat my time on my previous run. And I think this is the way that they should go about it. I have offered this suggestion to them. I don't know anybody there, but I will say that sometimes my suggestions end up happening in the game, so that's kind of cool. Just small things and very small things, and it's probably a coincidence, frankly. But I like to say this just in case, if I have any influence, I am trying to make the game better and kind of bring both sides of the community together more than what they are. They're currently usually at odds. The hardcore community and then like the very casual community, even though the very casual community actually really supports the hardcore community. A lot of the people in the streams, for example, watching the world first and arena championships, they aren't actually high-end players. They're casual players who enjoy watching high-end players. So the rift is a bit more pronounced like on a site like Twitter or Reddit or something like that, but it does exist. And I do like to try to bring those people together by a compromise of solutions that people can be happy with. And that's usually my goal when one of these type of things comes up. If you go back and watch any of my videos, even if I don't talk about it like this, it's kind of evident that my goal is to kind of have a compromised solution that can kind of make everybody happy to some extent. So that's my thoughts on Torghast. This is going to be coming out on Christmas, so Merry Christmas to everyone who celebrates Christmas. And I do ask everyone to subscribe as always, and everybody have a good one.